All right. Awesome. Well, we are live. Folks are coming in here. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight. We're going to give it a minute or so as folks continue to flood in here and get the latest on what's happening in the whitetail woods. So I got Tony Peterson with me. A lot of you guys probably know him from some Meat Eater episodes, does some stuff on the Wired to Hunt podcast. You're all over the place, man. Tell us, where have you been in the last week as far as your hunts? And how have they gone, and kind of, give the synopsis of what you've been doing.
Man, I have been, we were filming the season 2 of 1 Week in November for Meat Eater. And so I spent 3 days last week hunting public land in Western Minnesota and trying a new challenge for me that kicked my butt, but I'm gonna go back. And then I ended up spending the last 4 days because the Minnesota gun season opened on Saturday. So I spent the last 4 days over in Wisconsin hunting the rut, and it was pretty wild, man. It was pretty tough until that weather broke, and then it got real good real fast.
Okay, sweet. So when you went over to Western Minnesota, when did you start that trip?
November 1.
November 1. Okay, so you were there for like November 1 through 5.
Yeah, I left the night of the 4th, I think. So I was there just for, it probably seems crazy already to think about, but it was like 70 some degrees, 40-mile-per-hour winds. It was like wild, just not good rut weather. And then we drove through and had 2 days of just pouring rain, and then it finally broke. So it was like what the rut often gives you, where you're like, oh, I can't wait for the rut. It's going to be 20 degrees and beautiful. And you just get, Mother Nature's like, no, not today, bro.
So in Western Minnesota there, like, were you going, the entire day without seeing a deer? Like, what kind of activity did you have over there?
I saw some deer. I saw deer every day, and, I had deer within shooting range a couple different times. So it wasn't like a total loss, but it was, just to see chasing activity was real rough. And, I wanted to hunt over there because I've been pheasant hunting there a lot. And, I do a lot of late season hunts, and I kick up bucks in random places. And I'm like, this is just the kind of spot I just want to try. And, it's cattail sloughs and limited wood lots, and just different than a lot of the stuff I hunt. And so, we started out within 5 minutes of getting set up into my first spot. I had deer on us. I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. And it was just okay. And, sometimes you just have weird stuff happen. Like I found a spot, just pulled up. I always look for river systems in that kind of country where it's real open, because that's you can find miles of cover there in counties that don't have any cover. And so, I pulled up onX before we went, and I was like, man, there's one river system here that should work. And I found a spot in there that was like just my style. Had the high banks on the river, tight cover. It was like everything. And when I got in there, I scouted it on Halloween. Fresh tracks. There were some boot prints in there, but I expected that. And then when I went in there to hunt, I was literally got to the tree. I was going to go saddle up, and I looked over, and there was a dead buck laying on the trail. And I'm like, so I walked over there, and there's a nice dead buck, gut shot, I think. Like, you couldn't tell the coyotes had gotten to it, but I'm like, what are the odds? 2 days ago, there's no dead buck there. Today, there is. And, obviously the area is saturated in coyote scent. There's probably people in their blood trailing. And so it was just kind of a weird deal with it was just bad juju, man.
Yeah, that's tough. And then, so, of course, folks, I forgot to mention there is a chat and a Q&A in the bottom here. So the chat's a great spot to bop in, let folks know what you've been seeing from rut activity in your neck of the woods, start some banter there. Of course, please keep it cordial. And then the Q&A, if you have questions for Tony or Philip or Nate when they come on, feel free to throw them in there. And so, Tony, your Wisconsin hunt, did you shoot that buck? Was that 2 days ago?
I shot him on Monday. So I shot him on the 7th.
Okay. Couple days ago. So when you were in Wisconsin, what was the activity like when obviously here in the upper Midwest, we had that rain on, what was that, Saturday, and then Sunday was a beautiful day. What did you kind of see there in that change on your rut activity? Did you change your strategy at all with that weather change? Walk us through what you were doing there those couple days.
I had to change my strategy because I was filming. And so we were, you're not going to go sit in a tree when it poured where I was for 2 days. I mean, it was rough. And as soon as it started to lighten up, we got out, and immediately the first deer that I saw was a nice buck, came cruising through. And when that broke, it just, it was like November 6th, and it started to get better. I saw my first really big deer, probably 150s. And then I had made a move to kind of play off of some of this thicker cover, because I was sitting places where I thought the terrain was going to work for me, but it was just too open, and I just wasn't seeing the activity. So I had to move to where there was a little bit thicker stuff, and then those bucks were sneaking in to just check these little patches and thickets. And that's, the last morning I was there, I had a little buck come through, and then I had that 8-pointer that I shot come through, and felt like it was just busting open. Like if you were there now, it would probably be incredible.
Interesting. Okay. So you were getting tight to cover, presumably getting, as close to that bedding stuff as you could when you killed that buck, it sounds like.
Yeah, the farm I'm on there is, it's like 180 degrees difference from the public land I was hunting. It's a private place. It's in bluff country, beautiful. I mean, it's an amazing property, but it's all super old growth deciduous forest. So even though it's like, man, you can drive around there in the summer and you see 140s, 150s in fields all over. When that pressure kicks in, those bucks aren't living in that open stuff. Like they'll cruise through there, and then the does too, they're like, I don't really want to bed here in the wide open woods. And so the patch that I killed my buck in is maybe 2 acres. But, the first deer I saw when we set up on it, the first deer that came in, there was a doe that came in and bedded down at 26 yards in the afternoon. And you just go, this is just where I need to be, and then those bucks, the way they acted, they ran in there, they poked their noses in there, and then they ran out because they're like, maybe not,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So good question here coming from Griffin Green. High winds, I think there's a lot of folks dealing with high winds. It's howling outside of my hunting camp right now in Wisconsin. He said it's supposed to be 20, 25 where he's at. How do you change your strategy in high winds this time of year, if at all?
Really my key to the rut is playing off of something tight like that. So I want to sit a place they have to use their nose to check. Because if they walk in there and they can look and they can't see anything and they can't hear anything, they're going to keep moving. But if you've got like an old homestead, or you got a little swamp or a cattail slough or something, it's like they have to scent check that to know what's in there. Then that wind isn't hurting you. You just got to play it right. And you think about it and go, wow, people worry about the moon phase and the high winds and heat and whatever. It's like that rut's happening now. They're going to do their thing, and the wind is actually that doesn't really bother me at all. I'll take some wind.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. In fact, I like the wind a little bit. Those still days are tough. Those deer are just on edge. Tony, calling bucks. This question got asked a ton the last time we did this a week ago. What are you doing when it comes to calling bucks?
I'm so cagey on that stuff because I mostly hunt public land that I always have a grunt call with me. I rarely rattle. I'm just not in situations where that works very well for me. But I like to read bucks, right? Like if you see a buck that's just kind of like he's all by himself and he's just looking for something to do, man, I will grunt at that deer or I will snort wheeze at him every time if I don't think he's coming in. If I think he's going to get there, I'm not going to announce my presence. But if that deer is just kind of like, you can just kind of watch them, like there's like a cadence to their movement, and you're like, that deer might be looking for something to do, and you can call those deer. And so I always have a grunt tube, and always know how to snort wheeze. I think snort wheeze is way underrated.
So do you do a snort wheeze with a call or just with your mouth?
Just with my mouth.
And all right, we need it.
Simple.
That's it.
That's it, man. And it works. And it's not, people think it's only like a dominant buck thing. And I've totally stumbled out of this by accident, but I did that one time to a buck I saw in Minnesota, and he was like a 140. He was a great deer. And I had a forky come running in. And I was like, what are you doing? And then ever since then, I've started messing around, and I've snort wheezed in bucks outside of the rut, snort wheezed in little bucks. I mean, it's not like I don't want to sell it as like you should just go out there and blind snort wheeze like crazy, but I think they're more receptive to it than we've been told.
So have you ever heard one snort wheeze in the wild unabated by you?
Yeah. It's not very often.
Like I've never heard it. So like biologically, what is a snort wheeze? Do you know? Like what are they communicating there?
A challenge.
Okay.
I honestly think it's like, come at me, bro. Like really, because a grunt is different, right? Like, deer will grunt at other deer as like a contact thing. Like, I see you, but it's not necessarily like we need to fight now. And then, deer will also grunt just when they're chasing or when they're looking. So that has like a different meaning in the deer world, I think. But I think a snort wheeze is just a challenge. And I called in a buck one time on public land in northern Wisconsin that had got past me. I didn't hear him coming. It was super windy. And when I saw him, he was already like 60 yards past me in the clear cut. And I snort wheezed at him and he stopped. And I did it 5 times, and I could see him like get ticked off every time I snort wheeze. And he finally like put his head back like, fine, and turned around and walked in, and I shot him. And watching him, it honestly looked like a deer getting progressively more ticked off with every snort wheeze.
Interesting. So a lot of visualization in your calling strategy, it sounds like, regardless of the sound you're throwing at them.
Yeah, man, I don't blind call. I really, my style is like, I like to get where I think deer are gonna walk and shoot them when they go past me. And if I get in tight to where a buck looks comfortable, where he just like has that kind of swagger, that deer's super callable. It's just like, to me, it's like turkeys. If you hunt public land turkeys, like you could see that bird gobbling out in the field or strutting out in the field 300 yards away. You can throw everything you want at him. Doesn't matter. He's not coming.
Yep.
If you sneak around there and you get 75 yards away and you scratch in the leaves and do some soft, purrs and a little bit of yelping, that now you're in his red zone, and that bird will swing over. Bucks are the same way.
Yeah. I like it. All right. Last one here before we hop over to Philip and see what he's been seeing. Right now we're getting into kind of that second week in November, late second week in November. A lot of folks lockdown is kind of floating around, whether it's already happening or coming to happen. Do you have anything that you have found to be successful in getting on mature bucks during that phase where it just kind of seems the woods is dead?
Man, keep after it, because everybody's bailing. Everybody gets, so fired up around Halloween in the first week of November. And even if you just run cameras this time of year, the big ones are still looking. It's not an all out chase fest, but if you get in and for me, it's get into the cover and sit all day, but there's still a lot of rut left, man. And like in some places, like the best part. So I think a lot of people just kind of, they fizzle out a little too early, and they think it's over, or like, oh, the lockdown. Like, well, they're not all locked down, and they're not locked down forever, man. Like, get out there and put in the time.
Awesome. Well, where are you headed off to next, Tony? And then we'll bid you adieu.
You know what? I don't know. For deer, maybe maybe Minnesota still. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe South Dakota. I'm gonna go hunt some pheasants, and I'll figure it out.
Nice. Well, enjoy the bird walks. I know you got fresh Venny in your freezer from you and your daughter's work. So congrats on a great fall so far. And we'll talk to you again soon, my friend. Thanks for hopping on here.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
See you, Tony.
See ya.
Philip, how we doing, brother?
Hey, buddy. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Where's Philip Culpepper reporting in from today?
I'm getting some airs, some nocturnal spells. I just rolled into Illinois like 12 minutes ago. So
no
I drove.
kidding.
I was in Maryland and just drove back today. So
No kidding. So were you hunting Maryland? Was that 2 days ago you shot that buck, or was that literally yesterday?
That was yesterday morning. So I was I was here hunting, and then I went up there. I got a trip. We got a really good family up there we hunt with. Good, just every year we go up there, and we do a trip with my dad. So it's a trip I don't want to miss. So I went up there at least for last year it was in the middle of the Kansas saga, and then this year I was here in Illinois. So then I left and went there for a few days. I killed that deer yesterday morning. Then I got in the truck this morning and drove back 12 and a half hours. So it's a pretty good haul.
It's a lot of driving, but you got to sling an arrow. So what did you see in Maryland in, the couple days that you hunted there? What was rut activity like? What were, some of your strategies? You obviously killed a buck. Sounds like you rattled them in. Kind of walk us through, your couple days hunting there.
Yeah. So we got there, and we typically do that hunt. The past 2 years, we've done it the first week in November, and the deer are normally getting pretty fired up. Obviously this year's a little bit warmer than it's been in the past, but we pushed it back a week, and that's by far the best I've seen it that we've hunted. I mean, that they were like, some deer were locked down, and other deer were, the ones that weren't, were cruising looking, and it was pretty funny, because where I ended up killing there, I was going in, there was an old ladder stand they've had up, and I was going in early. Hadn't hunted it in probably 6 or 7 years. I didn't want to make a ton of noise, so I just went in for daylight and backed out, sat on the edge of the field and waited for it to get about an hour after daylight. I saw 2 deer actually locked down with those in this big bean field. Once it got daylight, good, I slept down there, got in the ladder stand. I wasn't up there like 20 minutes. And there was a real pretty young deer that was locked down with the doe across the ditch from me. They were just laid up in a thicket of some deadfalls. So I rattled, and when I rattled, this deer came storming off the hill behind me, and came underneath the stand. I shot him, and my buddy came. I was up there 25 minutes maybe. So my buddy came.
That's
we
it.
went down.
That was your hunt.
Oh yeah, it was done. And so I mean, I was like, golly, should I shoot him? Should I not shoot him? I was like, I can't. I've never rattled one in. So I was like, I got to. And so he was like a bona fide. I don't want to cut him any slack. He was a 5-pointer, but technically he was a 6. He's had 1 point broke off. So he ran down to the bottom of the hill. Buddy, we high-fived, went down there, was looking at him, taking pictures, high-five and everything. And so we look up, here's something running. Here comes a doe running underneath the stand. Another big, blocky mature deer had her locked down, and we watched them for 30 minutes within 20 yards of the stand. And he was just, like a cutting horse, having her hemmed up. So it was, it's in Maryland right now. It's rocking right now. So my dad's still up there, so I'm wishing him luck. Hope he gets something. So, but it's about to break. I'm back in Illinois. I'm excited about this. I was here 7 days before I went to Maryland, and they were trying to get going here, but now I think with this cool weather, it's supposed to hit tonight and tomorrow, so it ought to be on fire here.
So are you do you have some cameras out in Illinois right now?
Yes, I do. I've got a good deer showing up, and it was, fate has it, the day I hunted 7 days, saw him one day, had him at like 45 yards. He was running another little buck around. And then the day I left, he was daylight. So I had, I got a couple cell cameras out, and then I'm going to say, so like I said, they're about to break loose here. And then the last week in Georgia, I've got cameras out there, and me and my best friend I grew up with got a place we hunt, and he actually killed his best Georgia buck last week there. So they're rocking and rolling at home too. But everything, it's funny because almost all the cameras I got between Maryland, Georgia, up here in Illinois, just within the last 3 days, like all the pictures at night are blurry from deer just run. I mean, they're getting with it. One deer up here, his tongue was hanging out. So they're about to I think they're about this cold weather and the way the moon is, I think they're about to just break loose everywhere.
So there's a couple questions in here, directly related to what you just referenced there. You're getting good buck pictures, at night. What are you doing to hunt that buck, when you got them, at 8 p.m. or midnight or 4 a.m.? How are you backtracking, and how are you getting on that deer?
Well, it's like up here, I've been hunting pretty hard in Illinois. It took me that 7-day stretch I hunted in the first time. The first 4 days, I didn't hunt him in the mornings because I had pictures of him before daylight, and I know it's a tight area, and I'm tight over their bed and all. It's really thick in there, but I just didn't want, until they really start pushing or looking, I didn't want to blow them out. To where I think right now you know, is obviously the cameras tell the tale. And first, if you got a deer there, don't go off everything the camera says. I mean, because I think that hinders you. If you know you got something you want to hunt, especially right now when it's November, go in there and hunt. I mean, right now I think is where you got to put some seat time in and ride it out. You know, obviously, and I moved my stand. I made about a 60, 70 yard adjustment from where I was hunting last week, you know, a little bit closer to, I think right now you can get away with it whenever they're just, you know, I think to a certain point, you got to throw caution to the wind and go in there and hunt. You know, I mean, I if you go off what trail cameras are showing right now, you may have a 200 in there you don't have a picture of. So, I mean, there's no telling how many times deer do laps around cameras and never even getting their picture taken because they're going everywhere. You know, I think as far as if you're just in an area where you know deer are at or deer, and where I'm at a really thick spot where it's, you know, I hunted all day last trip. I'm gearing up. I got snacks from everything. I'm ready to go all day because I really think it's so thick in there. It's perfect cruising for if I've got pictures of this deer every 3 days, which is, I don't know. I'm no whitetail expert by any means, but years ago, I filmed Ben McDonald in Kansas. We had a spot where this deer was holed up where he really was his core area. And he would come in there. We saw him. We hunted him 14 days, killed him the last day. But every 3 days we would see the deer. He would come in there and get a doe and push her out and be gone. Then whenever he released her and got done with her, he would come back in there looking for another doe. So I'm having flashbacks with this deer. What little bit I've hunted him, I've got him on camera. Now, granted, I think he's been in there more than what the pictures are telling, but every 3 days I've got him on camera to where it's almost like he's coming in there looking, and then he leaves, and then he's making his round. So I think you just got to ride it out and stay committed to him. You know, I wheezed in a good deer, a good 8-pointer. The last day I was here last time, and I let him go, you know, trying to hold out for this deer. So hopefully the seat time, and, you know, I'm new. This is the first year I've hunted up here. So I've stayed up and looked at onX till my eyes are red, looking at it, trying to study it and figure out what to do. And obviously had a game plan going into it. So it's paying off so far. Like I said, I've laid eyes on it. To me, that's a win. So, I mean, you know, but again, I'd like to get them keep.
So there's quite a few questions in here regarding, you know, are you using any like scent lures? Are you making any mock scrapes? Do scrapes really mean anything to you at this point in the rut? You know, give us some of your takes on those things.
Man, it's interesting because this spot just up here, like right now, I think, I'm not saying deer's not going to hit a scrape, you know, if he's coming through and not on a doe, but right now I think, you know, a couple of weeks ago was your main scrape activity. But, you know, that being said, there's one scrape in there that these deer are dominating, but it's an old cross fits in there and there's a gap in that fence. I'm more concerned about that gap. That's how them deer are traveling through there, getting from point A to point B and cruising through their checking does. So, you know, I would be just as excited about that fence gap if there wasn't a scrape there as the fact that there is, because I think right now, you know, I wouldn't base it off finding a big scrape unless it's just something super fresh. And, you know, the rut does seem to be a little bit late. But right now, I think you got to be where the does are at, where they're holding up in some thick cover and just try to ride it out. Because I mean, at some point, something's going to show up there. I mean, because I think every day's ticking, it's getting better.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a couple questions in here on decoys. Have you ever ran decoys, Philip? Because I sure have not.
I have not, you know, as much as I use one turkey hunting, I've never used one deer hunting, but it's funny, a guy in camp, he used one tonight for the first time and almost killed a good deer. He said he grunted to him and he came all the way across the field to it. So I've wanted to, I've thought about it. But I grew up hunting Georgia and Alabama to where it's so thick, you know, which our deer, they got a sixth sense anyway. I've been scared to even put a decoy out for a deer, but I think out here in this open country, I think it could really pay off. I mean, I think it just depends on the terrain and, you know, because I think if you're a little bit tight quarters, it may, you know, end up spooking something, but I don't know. I hadn't used one enough to tell you whether it would or not.
Yeah.
If you're seeing a deer and can't get him in range, I mean, I'd throw the kitchen sink at him, try it.
Yeah, 100%. Sounds like there's someone in here, newer hunter, seeing a lot of little bucks, and some does, but not finding any mature bucks. Obviously, with the rut kicking off, or, you know, being really in full swing in a lot of places here, is there anything that you would do to kind of like re-strategize if you were seeing good numbers of deer and not mature deer? Any, particular land features or hunting bedding, or, is there anything that you would do in that scenario to try to find, an older class deer?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can look at sign and like we said, I think right now, if you're in an area where there's some does are at, there's no telling what may show up. So obviously if you're in deer attracting deer, and again, to go back to what we talked about trail camera stuff, there could be a 200-inch deer living there. And just, my gosh, Kansas last year, I hunted a deer for 40 days and saw him one time. So, I mean, but I knew he was there. So, I mean, like I said, if you're in the ballpark with deer, and right now does are king. So, I mean, like I said, each day is getting better, and there's no telling what. No prime example, when I was in Maryland, that doe brought that big mature deer by me, that to where it's like, even if they are locked down, if you're near bedding and there's spots where deer are at, I mean, I guess everybody's each their own, but I mean, I've tried to just figure out the way deer naturally moving through an area and just try to hunker down and ride it out, because I mean, my biggest fear, like we got a pretty good bit of land up here to hunt, and I'm hunting literally like a patch of 8 acres of woods to where, but I know, obviously know there's a good deer in there, but the deer are traveling through there. And my fear is to have a couple of bad days and start jumping around, and then you miss your chance, like I said. So, I mean, if you're in deer, and especially you got does, I think you just need to, just ride it out, unless you got some intel from something else. But I mean, if there's does there, something ought to show up. I mean, it shouldn't be just little bucks, you wouldn't think.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's only a matter of time. So there's a lot of chatter about the cameras, particularly cell cameras. What cameras are you using? What ones have you used in the past? And why are you using the ones that you're currently using?
I'm running Spartan cameras. I've used them since, I don't know when they really came on the market, but they were the first ones that I have only ever used cell camera wise. They're, I'm from Georgia, so they're right up the road from us. So we started using them, and I've got some that I've had for 5 years. They're still, running like I got them yesterday. And obviously they've had upgrades and done enhancements, but I mean, they're addicted. If anybody's never tried them, they'll keep you up at night. Cause I mean, you'll sit there and be scrolling, looking. And then, like I said, it's you try not to base everything on cell cameras. If you just know a deer's there, especially right now, go hunt. But I mean, it's like, you'll be on cloud 9 1 minute, and then you're like, I ain't got a picture of him in 3 days. There ain't no point in even going. And then bam, there he is. So I mean, it's like,
yeah,
right. And I do love them. Just especially I try, I do a lot of traveling, so it's nice. Not only when you're in somewhere here, if you got different pieces of property or different sides of the property you're hunting, whether it's public, private, whatever it is, but being across the country, you can keep up with everything to, kind of see what's going on and know what's hitting. And it is pretty neat being able to do that just on camera, looking at the weather fronts, the way whenever it's hitting different parts of the country, deer, your phone starts pinging. So, but I've used Spartan for several years. I love them.
Yeah. So obviously, like on this Illinois hunt, you're hunting a specific deer, but when you were in Maryland there, it sounded like you were just looking for, an older class, mature deer. Good question came in. What attributes are you looking for in a buck, to tell, if it's a mature buck when he's coming in on the hoof?
Man, I mean, normally I've always the first thing I look at with binos is their forehead. I mean, if they got a dished out forehead between their eyes, look like you put your fist in there, 90% of the time they're mature. Then, you look at your brisket. If they got a big, a loose brisket moving around, it's a mature deer. And in the more recent years, my buddy in Kansas, Perry Ross, has always said that he goes, if a deer is facing away or coming at you, he goes, look at his hind end. If his hind end is as big as his shoulders, he goes, if he's got if his back end's that big, then he's a mature deer. And they're on their neck, you can see a distinct like esophagus line. So which that's getting specific stuff, but those are in the heat of the moment. I look for as many things as I possibly can, just anything to identify. Cause especially like that, when that deer was just storming coming in, I mean, when they're bristled up, everything looks mature. So, I mean, it's like, like I said, the main thing is, the first thing I look at is between their head, their forehead. If they got a big dished out forehead, it's a mature deer.
Yeah. So over the next, couple days here, it sounds like your strategy is going to be hunting tight to bedding cover, sticking out with one deer and just persistence winning the game?
Yep, I'm on. Well, I mean, it's something else. I say that I talk a big game now, but if something else comes in there, the other day I about pulled the trigger. So I'm gonna do my best. If I know he's still there and either laying eyes on him or getting pictures. I mean, the neighbors, somebody. I mean, I don't know who else around there could kill him. I don't. But I mean, I'm not going to be stupid with it. You know, if it's something good comes in there that's mature, I'm gonna shoot it. But I mean, you know, I had a 130-inch 8-pointer the other day. I mean, I ain't never passed a deer like that in my life, and he came under me. But the day before, I seen that big deer, so I was like, man, I'm gonna stick to my guns and wait him out. But yeah, my plan is just to hunt right there on the edge. Like I know the deer crossing there. There's crops on the outsides of it that's been cut. There's water in there. There's a water hole the deer are hitting. So there's bedding, there's thick, there's cover, there's acorn. So it's a recipe of just everything kind of merged together. It's like I said, it's just a matter of getting lucky and being there when he's there.
Right on. So we'll wrap it up with you here, Phil. Appreciate you coming on. So how long are you in Illinois, and what's your next state that you're hopping to after you get it done there?
I'm going to be here. I'm going to probably hunt here till middle of next week. Unless, you know, the Lord works a miracle and get him killed soon, then I'm probably go down to Tennessee and hunt, and then from Tennessee go to Georgia. So my goal is to try to get home by Thanksgiving, but I mean, I hadn't been home in a month and a half. So I mean,
well, you're a man on the road this time of year, fall and spring, but hey, wouldn't trade it for anything. So Philip, appreciate you hopping on, man. Good luck up there in Illinois. I hope to see a picture of a big one.
Yeah, buddy. I'll keep in touch, buddy. So good luck in the woods and good luck to everybody. Y'all stay safe.
Appreciate it, Philip.
See you, buddy.
Nate, how we doing today, buddy?
I'm good. Can you hear
right
me?
on. Yeah, we got you. So this is Nate Crick, everybody, from Identical Draw. If you guys are not familiar with them on Instagram, YouTube, go check them out. He and his brother Thomas put out some high-end, awesome content, particularly surrounding hunting whitetails. You know, you guys do a lot in Nebraska and Kansas, make some trips to Colorado and elsewhere. Where have you been hunting here the last few days?
Oh man, it's Kansas all day.
And have you been out pretty consistently here over the last week and continuing to be?
Yes. I'm going to be getting more consistent, kind of relying on some camera intel, but we hunted all day Monday and then a few morning and evenings here and there. It's nice. It's a short drive, like to where we actually live. So we haven't been staying down there and just hunting all day, every day. But through this weekend and next week, it's going to be basically sticking it out until it happens. So
right on.
Yeah.
So I know you and Tom, you know, keep track of pretty much all of the bucks on your Kansas ground there.
Yeah.
As far as your trail cameras and transient bucks showing up, have you been seeing a lot of unfamiliar deer rolling through right now? Not yet, already happened, and less of them. Kind of what have you been seeing there just as far as those random cruisers that pop up on trail camera?
Yeah, I'd say since the last week of October, it's been pretty interesting. There's been definitely some new ones. This year, it's actually been interesting. One of the best times, at least for the 80, has been in December, and because we leave all of our food standing, and so we get it's almost like another rut, like late season, because we have a bunch of neighboring bucks that just come and visit. But we've actually had some of those like late season December bucks already rolling through, and like they're actually more like over a more mature deer. And so yeah, it's very interesting. You never know who's going to show up. Even like we've got a few homebodies, but the ground I'm hunting is 80 acres. So it's like there aren't that many bucks that are calling that place home. I mean, you're going to have a lot of just traveling through the area or living in like kind of in the area, but not just like calling the 80 acres home. So yeah, there's one buck in particular. We had him last year, and he had an insane left side, but his right side was pretty weak last year. And then he showed up this year, just monster. Nice. And he's older than heck. Like he looks like a freaking horse on the trail cam. Just big bodied sucker. Probably, I don't know. He might hit the 160 mark, but just like thicker than crap. And he's one of those deer that he showed up last week, and I know he's not going to be here in 2 weeks. I just know. He was last year, he was around for, I don't know, 10, 12 days, I think. And so he's here now.
How much stock do you put in that? I mean, obviously you guys keep track of that type of thing as far as, you know, X deer showed up on October 31st last year, and we never got a picture of him after November 3rd or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you guys find those deer to be semi-consistent in that data becomes valuable to note down, or it's more just something that it's fun that you guys do and you can kind of throw it to the wind?
We totally keep track of it all. Like we kind of go over the top on keeping track of that, because man, and the reason we do it is because it's been true a lot of the times. Like bucks that show up in late October have really been showing up in late October. Bucks that show up in the first week in November really show up in the first week in November. It was like last year, actually November 11th and 13th last year were like absolutely insane days on the 80. New bucks, like mature bucks, daylighting. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Let's just say that. But that it's something that, man, Thomas and I keep a serious eye on. And yeah, it's been fairly accurate over the past few years. And we've been fortunate, man. This area of Kansas, the neighbors aren't just freaking insane. Like, I mean, guys are passing 150-inch deer. Like,
well, that helps.
Yeah, it helps. So, I mean, we're able to watch, like, we know a couple of deer. We've known them for 3 or 4 years. And I mean, it's wild. Like, I mean, I'm in that boat a little bit. Like, I've never been like into like really passing giant deer like that. But I mean, like, I didn't necessarily pass them, but like I was really having like a freaking really tough time deciding. I think it was, what day was it? It was within the last few days. Had a buck that we call wide load that Thomas and I have been arguing about whether we're going to shoot him or not, and went into the hunt like not shooting this deer, and then saw him, and I'm like, that would be my biggest deer ever, dude. That deer is freaking monster, and he is the widest whitetail I've ever seen in person. But we know for a fact that he's 4, because we've had him the last 2 years. We know like 100% he's 4.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, if I was in Nebraska, I would be shooting that deer so fast. But I legit know in this area in Kansas that deer will get passed by the neighbors. So I'm like, I ain't gonna be the one to shoot him. Like I've 100% had my bow in my hand, and I grunted him in from about 120 yards. He was coming like right to us, and then ended up slipping like within 30 yards, but downwind, and got our wind and left. And I was like, thank God he got our wind. Because man, I probably would have shot him, but I don't want to shoot him. Like I want to, but I don't, because he's been a homebody the last few years, but man, his jump from 21 to this 22 year was insane. So I'm like, okay, get through. But yeah, that was kind of a giant workaround. But yeah, this time of the year, man, it's like anything could stroll through at any time.
Yep. So do you have a preference on hunting mornings versus evenings this time of year? Let's say you can only hunt one because you got to work a half day or this, that, or the other thing. Are you picking a morning or an evening?
I'm picking the morning.
Any particular reason?
At least this year. This year, just the mornings have been better. I don't know why. We've seen way more buck movement in the mornings, and then I don't know. Like I love the cover of darkness, just getting wherever you want to get to, especially if you got a little wind cover. Like I was looking tomorrow morning down in the 80. It's looking like a steady wind of at least like 15, 18 miles an hour, and then like gusts up to like mid 20s. And I'm like, dude, that in the dark, I can go wherever the heck I want. Like just freaking pick a spot and go.
And does that amount of wind, obviously Kansas blows a little bit differently than say, Ohio, but does the wind change the way you hunt at all when you get those 20 mile an hour, 30 mile an hour winds? Because I know a lot of the country is getting windy for, the next day or so.
Yeah, no, dude. I freaking love hunting in wind. Like if I see a 20-mile-an-hour wind, I'm pretty jacked up about it because at least I feel like deer like a little bit of that cover noise to get around. I think some of Thomas and I's slowest hunts over the few years have been like very, very low wind nights where the deer just like you could hear a pin drop and they're just freaking nervous and you can't get away with anything. If you freaking move in your stand at all, they're staring up into the tree and it's like, man, yeah, I love some wind cover. I mean, I think it makes calling. I feel like we've had some of our best like rattling hunts in some windier conditions too. It might be kind of weird because like you don't think it could travel as well, but I feel like it just gives the deer confidence to be able to go where they want.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So over these next couple days, let's say that you're struggling to see activity. You think that lockdown, might be happening on the 80 with some of the does there. Is there any particular strategy that you employ when you're not seeing those mature deer to, move in and, break the code and get in where they got those does locked down?
Yeah, it's on the 80 at least, we just cover our bases. It's kind of difficult because the whole 80 is just all thick cover. Like literally they could like people that talk about knowing exactly where buck's bedding. I'm like, Thomas and I aren't in that boat because he like deer could be bedded on. I mean, we've got a few acres of plots on there, but like they could be bedded on any 75 acres of the 80. So I'm like, knowing like exactly which thicket that they're probably going to be like locked down in or something like that isn't really a thing. But what Thomas and I do is, man, we just like we're super aggressive. We go wherever the heck we want. We just cover our bases on basically every inch of the property, and we still will do some calling because I do feel like you can get really aggressive with that stuff. One of our best hunts ever last fall, man, we took like a super aggressive ground hunting and rattling, and like we literally started in the south of our 80 and just worked up the gut and just like rattled every like 100 yards. And dude, we rattled in a crap load of bucks that night just because like you could have sat like on one of our stands and not seen anything. I feel like because it like wasn't like nothing was insane about that night, but we did have some wind cover. And yeah, I mean, I feel like people on like especially private ground just like are too like conservative, too worried about like doing that. But like we literally went up the gut of our 80 and we weren't worried about spook and crap. We were just like being super aggressive, just getting in tight, obviously like still hunting the heck out of it and like calling in strategic places. But sometimes this time of the year, like throw your haymakers because you've got 2 weeks here that you can get away with a lot.
Yep. And not a lot to lose, especially if you spent your vacation time here to hunt these couple weeks. So
Right.
Well, Nate, I appreciate you hopping in here. If you got any other tips or tactics you're gonna pull out, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, good luck on the 80.
Yeah. Well, hey, I was gonna ask you, have you ever hunted over a decoy?
So I've done it very little. I think maybe twice I've done it in Iowa. Both times a buck decoy. And neither time did it go overly well. In fact, from my family's experience, it seems as though that decoy, like every deer that steps out into the field is like, what is that thing? I don't like it.
Right.
Or you get that mature buck that steps out and he postures up and it's the coolest hunt of your life. Are you debating bringing one out tomorrow?
Yeah. So we've got a couple and we've done like 2 hunts with them so far. Nothing like insane, but we scared the living crap out of some does one night. But I mean, heck, dude, I'd freaking love for that thing to work out. Big buck just bristle up right in front of that thing. But yeah, I don't know. I know I see guys pulling it off this time of the year. And yeah, Thompson and I haven't done it, but man, we might break it out 1 or 2 hunts if we hunt some food source.
So last week, the report I did, Hunsucker's big tip, because obviously Mike Hunsucker from Heartland Bowhunter, that guy kills more deer over decoys than anybody I know. Partial glands. So like if he has a buddy that harvests a buck, that's what he said is something that he absolutely makes sure that he does if he's using a decoy is like as much deery scent on that decoy as possible, because those deer are going to come downwind of that decoy. And he said, like, when they come downwind of that thing and it doesn't smell like a deer, they get real weird. But that's the best piece of secondhand advice I got for you.
Gotcha. Sweet, dude. Well, yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. Just get out into the woods. That's all you gotta do this time of year.
Heck yeah, Nate. Well, appreciate the time, and thanks for coming out, everybody. Good luck in the woods. Shoot straight out there, and enjoy the rest of the rut that we have here for 2022.